Born into slavery on February 29, 1840, on a plantation in Norfolk, Virginia, William Harvey Carney's story is one of perseverance and resilience. Not much is known about his early life. Growing up in the harsh conditions of slavery, he faced unimaginable challenges. In a letter he wrote later in life, Carney discusses attending a private and secret school taught by a minister at the age of 14, acquiring rudimentary reading and writing skills, and embracing the gospel. Records differ, but according to some, the Carneys worked for a family by the name of Twine. His father, William Carney Sr., had been hired out by this family to go oystering. Carney also appears to have engaged in the coastal trade with his father. They were led to believe when their master died they would be set free. This did not happen. To avoid being at the mercy of the auction block, in the mid-1850s, his father escaped via the Underground Railroad. His father made a stop in Philadelphia, which was said to have a lot of Quakers who were concerned about the slaves, and then New York, which was deemed inhospitable due to its desire for commerce and gold and rampant bounty hunters and slave catchers. He eventually landed in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Although unclear, Carney also appears to have used the Underground Railroad and joined him shortly after. At that time, New Bedford was considered to be a place where slaves could really be accepted. There was a great anti-slavery movement here, with famous abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, Martha Briggs, and Reverend William Jackson, to name a few. Carney and his father, with the help of ministers in New Bedford and Norfolk, were able to purchase Carney's mother's freedom in 1859, and some of his siblings thereafter. In the early years, Carney said he remained in the city with family, pursuing the avocation of a jobber of work for stores and at such places as he could find employment. Some sources say he worked for the New Bedford docks for a period of time. He considered a career in the ministry. However, with the raising of black regiments in 1863 during the Civil War, Carney found another calling. In his own words, "Previous to the formation of colored troops, I had a strong inclination to prepare myself for the ministry. But when the country called for all persons, I could best serve my God by serving my country and my oppressed brothers. The sequel is short. I enlisted for the war." It was around this time Frederick Douglass returns to New Bedford, along with other black soldiers, to recruit. Carney hears this call, and on February 17, 1863, he enlists as a private for a 3-year term in the all-black, all-volunteer Massachusetts 54th Regiment. Carney was one of 46 volunteers from New Bedford who were assigned to Company C. In March, the regiment went on to training at Camp Meigs in Reedsville, Massachusetts. It would be during this training Carney would receive his promotion to sergeant. The 54th would then leave Boston for the front lines in May.
When it came time for someone to stand up and go out and fight, black Americans were just waiting for the opportunity. The increased manpower of the Union Army gave them a tremendous advantage on the battlefield. The first black volunteers to fight in the Civil War really showed the willingness of free blacks to go out and do what they could to make our country what it was supposed to be.
Proved that black men could fight and die as bravely as white men. And there were a lot of opportunities to do this because this was, and it still ranks as America's bloodiest war in terms of American lives lost. But there was widespread prejudice against African Americans. Most 19th century whites viewed them as inferiors and thought if you put them into uniform, if you put them into battle, they'll do one of two things. They will bolt and run because they're not going to be able to stand up to white men, or they will run amok like savages and kill everybody, murder the wounded and stuff like that. They'll be out of control. So, most of the black troops that are raised during the Civil War, because of that prevailing prejudice, they are used as garrison troops. The 54th Massachusetts, its example, helped to sweep away a lot of doubts.
Some would call it an experiment, black men fighting equally with their white counterparts. But these men felt it was much more than that. It was for the future of mankind and the future of the black race. My name is Carl Cruz, and I'm the great-great-grandnephew of Sergeant William H. Carney. Carney enlisted in the 54th Regiment on February 17, 1863. On July 18th, they would fight the battle that we now know as Fort Wagner.
Carney himself provides a vivid recollection of the battle. On the 18th of July, 1863, about noon, we commenced to draw near this great fort, under a tremendous cannonading from the fleet directed upon the fort. When we were within probably 1,000 yards of the fort, we halted and lay flat upon the ground, waiting for the order to charge. The brave Colonel Shaw and his adjutant, in company with General Strong, came forward and addressed the regiment with encouraging words. General Strong said to the regiment, "Men of Massachusetts, are you ready to take the fort tonight?" And the regiment spontaneously answered in the affirmative. Then followed 3 cheers for Colonel Shaw, 3 cheers for Governor Andrew of Massachusetts, and 3 cheers for General Strong. We were all ready for the charge, and the regiment started to its feet, the charge being fairly commenced. We had got but a short distance when we were opened upon with musketry, shell, grape, and canister, which mowed down our men right and left. As the color bearer became disabled, I threw away my gun and seized the colors, making my way to the head of the column. But before I reached there, the line had descended the embankment into the ditch and was making its way upon Wagner itself. While going down the embankment, one column was staunch and full. As we ascended the breastworks, the volleys of grape shot which came from right and left, and of musketry in front, mowed the men down as a scythe would do. In less than 20 minutes I found myself alone, struggling upon the ramparts, while all around me the dead and wounded lying upon one another. "Here," I said, "I cannot go into the fort alone." And so I halted and knelt down, holding the flag in my hand. While there, the musket balls and grape shot were flying all around me, and as they struck, sand would fly into my face. I knew my position was a critical one.
Militarily, the flag is your identification. And most of us think of that in terms of identification to the enemy. But it's also identification to your fellow troops and to your own soldiers in your regiment.
For a Civil War soldier, it not only had the symbolic importance, but it was also functional. The colors were posted in the center of the line of battle. And when your battalion was ordered forward, the front rank of the color party, they stepped 6 feet in front of the rest of the regiment. So you actually followed your flags into battle.
I turned and discovered a battalion of men coming towards me on the ramparts of Wagner. They proceeded until they were in front of me, and I raised my flag and started to join them, when, from the out of the cannon discharge on the fort, I saw that they were the enemy. I wound the colors round the staff and made my way down the parapet into the ditch, which was without water when I crossed it before, but was now filled with water that came up to my waist. Out of the number that came up with me there was now no man erect, save myself, although they were not all dead, but wounded. And rising to see if I could determine my course to the rear, the bullet I now carried in my body came whizzing like a mosquito, and I was shot. Not being prostrated by the shot, I continued my course, yet had not gone far before I was struck by a second shot. Soon after I saw a man coming towards me, and when within hailing distance, I asked him who he was. He replied, "I belong to the 100th New York," and then inquired if I were wounded. Upon my replying in the affirmative, he came to my assistance and helped me to the rear. "Now then," said he, "let me take the colors and carry them for you." My reply was that I would not give them to any man unless he belonged to the 54th Regiment. So he pressed on, but did not go far before I was wounded in the head.
He's able to get to the top. His colonel is killed in front of him. He's hit 3 or 4 times, but he keeps waving the flag as a rallying point.
Men are shot, left and right. I mean, they're going down by, unfortunately, by the numbers. Sergeant Carney sees the color bearer injured, throws his musket at size, reaches his flags, and then for the next 3 to 4 hours holds on to that flag.
Eventually, the 54th suffers more than 40% casualties and has to retreat. And Carney goes back. I mean, he's hit in both legs. He's hit in his shoulder, possibly his breast as well. He has to retreat on his knees for nearly a mile. But he won't give up that flag. He's going to get that back. He's not going to let it fall into enemy hands. He makes his way to a Union field hospital, and he comes in, and I mean, he must have been soaked with his own blood. And people are just amazed that he's still able to move. And just before he faints, he says,
"Boys, I only did my duty. The old flag never touched the ground."
His multiple wounds proved serious, however, as he spent the next several months in a hospital in Beaufort, South Carolina. Carney became a renowned hero for his actions at Fort Wagner and for his immortal words, "The old flag never touched the ground," For his actions, despite the tremendous risk to his own safety, Carney received the Gilmore Medal of Meritorious Award. He was also awarded the Medal of Honor, but unfortunately, due to an oversight in the papers, he initially did not receive it. It would only be in 1900, almost 40 years later, a fellow soldier by the name of Christian Fleetwood would put together an exhibit showcasing black soldiers. It would come to light that Carney had not actually received the medal. Christian would petition the War Department, and Carney would receive the actual medal shortly after in the mail. Unfortunately, he would never have a formal ceremony. The actions for which Carney was awarded the Medal of Honor preceded every other medal awarded to black soldiers, effectively making William H. Carney the first black recipient of the Medal of Honor. Carney returned to New Bedford in December 1863 and began to build his post-war life and family. He married Susanna Williams, also a native of Norfolk, Virginia, on October 11, 1865. He had several jobs, and because he was considered a hero, in 1866 he was made superintendent of streetlights. At that time, for a man of color to have that job over other whites was significant. He also used his reputation as a respected war hero to push for political change and advocate for civil rights, including pushing for the rights of black soldiers to vote. He became re-involved in his church and community and was instrumental in the founding of what is now known today as the Union Baptist Church. He also served as the choir master and joined in various civic and fraternal organizations, including the Odd Fellows. In 1869, he became one of 4 men employed as letter carriers in New Bedford. Many of the letter carriers were Civil War veterans at this time, since appointments were often based on connection, and it was common for a town's prominent citizens, and often the postmaster himself, to have been Union Army officers. Carney was the only black carrier. The nation's first known black carrier, James B. Christian, had only been hired a few months prior, so Carney would be a part of a group of pioneers taking part in forging the path of progress. Due to his getting shot in the leg during the legendary Battle of Fort Wagner, Carney would limp every step of his letter-carrying career, but this did not deter him. Carrie Lee Blanchett, a family friend, remembered him as a dedicated and diligent worker, reporting to work each morning at 6 and working until deliveries were completed, often until 7 or 8 at night. Just as Carney had enlisted for the Union Army, the Civil War hero was quick to step forward when mailmen around the nation decided to band together to form the National Association of Letter Carriers, or NALC. The charter of the New Bedford NALC Branch 18, issued March 20, 1890, includes Carney's signature as the founding vice president. In addition to the low branch number, the date makes it clear that New Bedford carriers were among the first members, as the NALC had only been founded 7 months earlier at the Milwaukee Annual Meeting of Union Army Veterans, known as the Grand Army of the Republic. In addition to being the vice president, Carney was involved in other Union activities. The December 1890 Postal Record, the official publication of the NALC to this date, reports that Sergeant Carney was one of 4 carriers who sang solos for a surprise 35th birthday for a fellow brother carrier. In the March and April 1891 issue, Carney is listed as a member of the reception committee for the annual Ball of New Bedford Letter Carriers, which was attended by 3,500 people. In 1897, a New Bedford post office handbook included a photograph of Carney with the caption, "Veteran Letter Carrier." While they lived at their house at 128 Mill Street, in June 1876, he and his wife welcomed their only daughter, Clara Heronia Carney. According to family friend Blanchett, a lover of the beautiful, Carney's hobbies were collecting china and making and listening to music. Most of his life he was a chorister, and educated his daughter at the New England Conservatory of Music. She would later become a well-known music teacher in the New Bedford area. In the 1890s and into the early years of the new century, Carney remained a featured guest and speaker at numerous civic events in New Bedford, Boston, and elsewhere. Accounts suggest he was an effective, if not spellbinding speaker, and the story of the assault on Fort Wagner was undoubtedly compelling for his audiences. On May 31, 1897, Carney joined his fellow remaining members of the 54th and other veterans for the dedication ceremony of Augustus St. Gaudens's the Robert Gould Shaw 54th Massachusetts Regiment Memorial in Boston. Carney led the parade of veterans, carrying the same flag he had taken up in the heat of battle. The crowd roared as he and the flag were recognized. After 32 years in the Postal Service, he retired in October 1901 at the age of 61. He still needed other work since, although he probably received a small stipend for his war wounds, postal employees had no retirement benefits at all. He was asked by Massachusetts Secretary of State William Olin to take a job as an official messenger to the Secretary of State. He accepted, and his duties involved transporting official documents between the Senate and House chambers and the Secretary's office. He would become only the second Black American to hold the position. In 1908, during his duties in the State House, Carney sustained a horrific leg injury in an elevator accident and was transported to City Hospital. He would ultimately die from these injuries on December 9th. Family, friends, dignitaries, and other mourners gathered at Carney's New Bedford home for his funeral before interring his remains at Oak Grove Cemetery. The governor sent a floral design in the shape of the state seal, and the NALC sent one in the shape of a postman's pouch. A squad from the Sons of Veterans fired a volley over his grave, and as a final tribute, all flags in the Commonwealth were ordered at half-mast, marking the first time this was done for a Black American.